Okay, today we're going to tackle a really big question about our planet, and honestly, a powerful lie that shaped how basically all of us think about our own impact. You know that feeling, right? That little pang of guilt when you forget your reusable bag, or maybe you take a shower that's a little too long. We've all been there. But what if that feeling is actually distracting us from the real story? I mean, we hear it all the time, don't we? Shrink your personal impact, use less water, recycle more, drive less. It's this whole narrative of personal accountability, and it really all comes down to one super famous concept. Yep, the carbon footprint. You've heard that phrase a million times. It's kind of become our personal scorecard for how well we're treating the planet, you know? And so, we try our best. We take shorter showers, we meticulously sort our recycling, maybe bike to work when we can. And look, those are all good things, for sure. But, and this is a big but, here's the question we really need to be asking. Are these little things we do every day, are they really the main characters in the whole story of our planet's climate? Or have we been, focusing on the footnotes while completely missing the giant bold headline? So to find the answer, we've got to zoom out, like way, way out. Let's stop looking at this from the ground level of our daily lives, and instead, let's get a bird's eye view from a much higher altitude. Okay, so on one side, you've got our personal actions, turning off a light, recycling a bottle, and on the other side, you have the massive output of global industry. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting when you actually compare the impact of these two things. And when you look at the actual numbers, wow, the difference is just staggering. The combined impact of all our individual lifestyle choices is a tiny, tiny fraction of the emissions coming from just a few key industrial sectors. Seriously, it's not even in the same ballpark. Here's another way to think about it. It's like comparing a single drop of water to an entire ocean. If we're only worrying about our own personal drop, we can completely lose sight of the industrial ocean that's actually driving the whole tide. So here it is, the crucial takeaway. The overwhelming majority of greenhouse gas emissions, it doesn't come from billions of us making little daily choices. Nope, it comes from a surprisingly small number of really, really big sources. And what are those sources? Well, two main players really stand out: a handful of massive corporations and the global military sector. The scale that they operate on it's just on a completely different level from you or me. Which, brings us to the big question here. If the numbers are this lopsided, why is the conversation almost always about our personal choices? Why all the focus on our individual carbon footprints? Well, it turns out this intense focus on our personal carbon footprint, it wasn't an accident. The whole concept was actually popularized, pushed right into the spotlight by some massive, really well-funded PR campaigns. And what was the goal of those campaigns? Well, a lot of them were funded by major fossil fuel companies. And the idea was pretty simple: shift the focus. Let's turn that big, bright spotlight away from their industrial scale emissions and shine it directly onto us instead. There is an analogy that just captures this perfectly. It's like blaming the passengers for a sinking ship. The narrative encourages all of us to run around, meticulously bailing out water with our little buckets, all while distracting us from the giant hole in the hull that's actually sinking the ship. And what's the result of all this? A huge, systemic problem that needs big, structural solutions gets reframed as a problem of individual morality, of personal failure. It's designed to make us feel guilty, not empowered to make real change. Now look, understanding this doesn't mean our individual actions are pointless. They're not. But it does force us to ask a much harder and maybe more important question. When we really look at the whole picture, who should really carry the responsibility for our planet's future?